Hey, Grandpa.
Hi, how you doing, Matt? Nice having you here.
Nice to be here. So, I always want to know, how did you meet Grandma?
Well, I got out of the Army on June 30th, 1953, and I used the Korean War Veterans GI Bill to enter Penn State in September of that year. Well, one day in, it would have been early October, I was coming back from an afternoon class, and I was feeling kind of tired. And as I approached the Student Union building, I thought about having a cup of coffee. And I changed my mind about 4 times. I said, yes, I will. No, I won't. Yes, I will. But when I got to the place you turned up to the Student Union building, I decided, yeah, I will. So I went up to the Student Union building. I got my coffee, and I went into this back room. And I saw three guys that I knew from the Veterans Club. And so I sat down with them. And in the course of the conversation, I happened to mention to them that I had learned to hypnotize people, and I learned that by watching a guy in my dormitory. Well, they wanted to see me hypnotize somebody, but not them. Now, at that moment,
But they didn't want to be hypnotized?
no, they didn't want to see. They want to see me do that, but not to them. They didn't want to be hypnotized. So at that moment, I looked to my right, and I could see the front door of the Student Union building. And there was a short girl there, long black hair, skin like Snow White. She was wearing a rose colored sweater and a green skirt and bobby socks. And her mouth was open. And later I found out that was its natural state. And she was holding the door open for her friend. Well, a couple minutes later, they had gotten whatever they wanted, and they came into this back room. And one of the guys at my table said to her friend, "Hey, Pat, come over here and let this guy hypnotize you." So Pat came over, and she sat down, and I tried to hypnotize her, but she was laughing too much. I couldn't put her under, and besides, she's not the one I wanted to put under. So I asked the other girl if I could try her, and she said, okay. So she sat down, and I put her under. I had her do a few simple things. I had her, I'd give her an empty cup and tell her it was full of coffee or something she'd think it was, and a few simple things just to demonstrate that she was under. One of the things that didn't work, though, is I tried to tell her she was Marilyn Monroe, and she wouldn't buy that. I found out later because she didn't think she had big enough breasts. but anyhow, and then I wake her up. And her friend Pat, who was her roommate, had to go somewhere, so I walked this other girl, who was Nancy, of course. I walked her back to her dormitory, and on the way I asked her for her phone number, and she gave it to me. So I called her up that night, and the next night I took her to the movies, and then after the movies I took her to a place where we had some ice cream or something. And when we were at that place, I said to her that I told her I was going to marry her. She told me I was crazy.
Wait, this is like the second date?
First date, really, because the other thing all they did was hypnotize her and walk her back to her dorm.
Okay.
So the first date. And as I told you last night, though, that the day that I met her, I went back to my dorm, and I'll tell you where this happened even. I was standing at the urinal, and another guy was at the other next urinal, and I said to him, I can still remember that, I said to him, "Today I met the girl I'm going to marry." So I knew it right away. And incidentally, I don't forget anything. I remember everything. All right, so anyway, when we were having the ice cream, I told her I was going to marry her, and she told me I was crazy. And then during that time, I was tricking her, too. I was saying things like, I was telling her about being in the Army. I said, I think our son ought to go into the Army. And she was saying things like, well, no, I don't think that's necessary. Wait a minute, we're not going to have a son. So anyhow.
So you would start talking about the future, and then she would just kind of fall into it, and then...
Yeah, right. I sort of tricked her, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And then she'd realize what I was doing. Yeah. Okay, now... At that time, Nancy was going with a fraternity boy, you see, but he was a dummy. He only took her out on Saturday night. Well, they gave me 6 days. I used those 6 days. I would be with her all the time. I would call her up, and she said, "Well, I have to go to class." And I said, "I'll walk you to class." "Oh, you don't have to do that." "Well, yes, I will." So I'd walk her to class. I spent almost all my time with her. A month later, she's the one talking about getting married. Yeah, and I'm saying, well, yeah, I want to marry you, but I didn't mean now. I meant after I got out of after I graduated from college and got started on a career, then I would like to marry you.
That's right, because she was a senior,
yeah,
and you were a freshman.
I was a freshman. I just started because I had spent 3 years in the Army. And she said, "Well, no, either you marry me when I graduate, or we don't get married at all." Well, what could I do? When she graduated, I married her. But that cup of coffee changed my whole life. Because without that cup of coffee, there's no way that I would have met her. Penn State, wasn't as big as it is today, but it was a big school then too.
Wow, I'm glad you had that cup of coffee.
Yeah, because you wouldn't be here if I didn't. And there's no chance that I would have met Nancy. I was a freshman, she was a senior. I was a political science major, she was a home economics major. She was a sorority girl, and I didn't give a damn about fraternities or anything like that. I would have never had anything to do with any of those things. So there's no chance that I would have met her at all, except for that cup of coffee. Yeah, and beating out her boyfriend, that was easy. He was such a dummy. I saw him one time, and after that I always called him Greasy George. He had sort of olive skin, and his hair, black, greasy hair. So he's the guy I always referred to as Greasy George. But Greasy George never had a chance.
Of course not.
No.
And I'm glad he didn't.
Yeah. And it turned out to be a wonderful thing, because your grandmother, I couldn't have asked for a better wife than her. She was the best.